Hey guys, this is DP0427 again, bringing you the fourth installment of RM. In this episode, we'll be looking at roster management, in particular, leveling versus gearing, strategy types, and the results and consequences of each. So, let's get into it. First thing we'll be looking at is leveling versus gearing. To be clear, when I say leveling, what I really mean is increasing your character's overall effectiveness by leveling and ranking them up, helping you to unlock their superpowers. As well, we'll also be looking at gearing, which enables you to increase their base stats of your character, but not their superpowers. So, on the one hand, you can use XP meta agents and green essence to level up your characters, which will be capped at whichever level you are currently at as a player. As well, you can rank up your character by collecting the necessary character shards to get them to that next rank, as well as paying the required green essence or legendary essence requirement. On the other hand, you can choose to upgrade the gears for your character that they're wearing by collecting the necessary gear materials and paying their necessary essence costs to equip the newly upgraded gears. Each gear rank is capped off at a certain level, so for example, Gear 10 requires a character level of 60 and Gear 11 requires a character level of 70. So in this example, in order to get my White Lantern Sinestro to Gear 10, even if I had the necessary gears and essence to do so, I need to first level up 2 more levels. Also not forget to upgrade your superpowers when you have the chance to and the resources to do so to make each one more effective. So when it comes down to which is more important, in general I would say that gearing is probably the largest deciding factor when it comes to a character's strength or effectiveness in a battle. However, you can only get so far just by gearing your characters, since you obviously need to level your character to a certain point in order to keep gearing. So at the same time, having a max gear high level character doesn't do too much if you don't have many abilities and legendaries unlocked. So it is important to rank up your characters to get the most out of them. But again, when you get to a certain point, the biggest factor that will make a difference is going to be your gear level. So I suggest focusing on that whenever possible. Next, we move on to strategy types. So right off the bat, I personally think that there's about 3 different types of roster building strategies. The first one I'm calling the for fun team types. The second one I'm calling the core team types. And lastly, we'll be looking at what I call the diversified roster type. So when we talk about for fun teams, what I really mean is building around characters that you like or that fit a certain theme that interests you. So this can be anything really, like a Justice League theme, lanterns, titans, you name it. When we're looking at a core team strategy, what we're really focusing on here is a select few characters that will help you tackle most problems with the way they handle each situation. So this could mean a team with a diversity of utility for a wide range of situations, a team that hits hard and fast, or a team that is built around synergy and staying power. In terms of diversified roster strategy, just as the name implies, it revolves around having a wide selection of characters to pick from at any given opportunity. So I'll be going into some examples of each strategy next. Next, let's take a look at some examples of strategies I've mentioned so far. So when it comes to for fun teams, picking something like Justice League Dark or the Injustice League or even Arrowverse could be something that appeals to you. If we look at a core team example, something like this Green Lantern Hal Jordan, Arceus, Wonder Woman Defender of Justice, and Harley Quinn Mad Jester team is something I personally used for a very long time. You have a good balance of affinities, you have 2 characters with AoE, 2 heavy hitters, a tank with evasion, stuns, and even call assists. So not to mention that at high ranks, your Green Lantern Hal Jordan's leadership gives you more protection via first turn immunities and shields, which have synergies with other lanterns. Another example is something like this Deadshot Hired Gun Starfire Larfleeze Etrigan team, which is built up of heavy hitters that want to get the ball rolling quickly and snowball out of control, which should in theory deal with pretty much most team compositions out there. Then you get a team like this one built around synergy and sustain, like this Wonder Woman, Princess of Themyscira, Clayface, Bane, and Swamp Thing team. The idea is that these characters are all hard to take down and they have built-in synergies with overheal, mending, and keeping their team clear of debuffs to allow them to get tons of free out-of-turn attacks. This sort of tanky composition also, in theory, has the tools to deal most opposing teams. And finally, there's no real example for a diversified roster approach, as the name implies. It means that you pretty much have a large part of your roster already built out, giving you the tools to deal with most situations. So let's compare and evaluate these different strategies and approaches. So the first one being the for fun team approach, and as the name suggests, is mainly for fun. So the biggest benefit to this strategy is the fact that you're playing with characters you enjoy and you're having fun for whatever reason. You enjoy playing with these characters, so that's the reason why you built these teams. The drawbacks, however, can include limited character selection, affinity imbalances, lack of answers, and a lack of synergy. This means that while you're having fun when the team is working fine, they may not always be getting the most out of their kits and abilities, and you may end up heavy in one affinity. So for example, an all-lantern team. And you could come up against a strategy and not have the right characters to deal with it. So for example, not having a buff purger or characters with heal immunity. So moving on, the core team approach has the following benefits. Having most affinities covered, having most strategies covered, and having a powerful core group of characters. So this means you should usually be able to deal with most situations in PvP with a mixture of the select few characters that you have, as long as you have most of these bases covered. Where they fall short is when it comes to PvE content. Since you're primarily invested in a central core of characters, if you happen to lose a few of them in red alerts, for example, it'll make it that much harder for you to complete it. This is like putting all your eggs in one basket. Also, there's difficulty in completing the heroic challenges, as having only a few powerful characters on your rosters means you'll also be disadvantaged when your characters are not featured on the eligibility list. So finally, when you're looking at the diversified team approach, this is basically the opposite of the core team approach, and the benefits and drawbacks are essentially inverted. This approach excels mainly in PvE content, but has a bit harder of a time in PvP due to power level. The idea is that since you have a wide range of characters that are medium to high level, you have a lot of options to pick from in most situations. When it comes to heroic challenges, you should almost always have a team of at least 3 to 4 characters more or less ready to go when the eligibility list is announced. When it comes to red alerts, since your overall power level of your characters is more or less the same, losing a few here and there isn't a big deal, as you can easily replace the ones that get knocked out. So conversely, when it comes to PvP, while the initial first couple of days each week might start out okay, but as you win and progress up the leaderboards, you'll find more and more high-level battles that you simply just can't beat due to a difference in power level. So due to the fact that you might be spread a little too thin. And this puts an artificial cap on your overall lateral movement and that you can make at any given time. So it is something worth considering if you're planning on pushing hard in PvP in the near future. Now that we know what type of strategies exist, the important thing to note is how they influence the leveling and gearing of your roster. So in both cases, for the for fun and core teams, you essentially only focus primarily on a few characters and more or less ignore the rest of your roster. In the case of a diversified roster approach, you essentially pick a level where you feel comfortable getting a good chunk of your roster to. So for example, if you're a max level 80 player, but you feel more comfortable at level 60 gear 10, so you aim to get most of your roster to that benchmark. So what happens when you start gearing based on certain strategies is that you'll come across certain different consequences based on different areas of the game, depending on which strategies you chose. So, starting with a diversified approach, as your roster increases in sizes, so does your to-do list. This means that your resources will be stretched thinner and thinner as more characters require your attention. As well, since you're capping yourself at a certain point, let's say level 60 gear 10, once you come across a matchup of level 70 plus gear 11, you pretty much have to skip it entirely. When you have a limited selection of characters that you focus on, let's say in either the core or for fun team approaches, you end up focusing all your resources on a select few. While having your main squad at, say, level 70 gear 11 will help you defeat most opponents in PvP, you will notice, however, a sharp increase in difficulty in red alerts once you get the fourth member of your team to that highest point that the rest of them are at. As well, another drawback to leveling and gearing characters to high level is that the current PvP Wraith Arena point system is dynamic and changes based on your power rating and league placement. So in a nutshell, the higher your power rating is, the smaller the gap between you and your opponent becomes, and therefore lessens the amount of potential points you could gain from winning that battle. I'll show some example videos to illustrate how going from 3 gear 11 characters to 4 gear 11 characters in my roster changes red alerts and PvP for me. Alright, here I'd like to show the effects of gearing from gear 10 to gear 11, and especially the difference between the third and fourth character on your roster of that gear level. So here I have Wonder Woman, DOJ, Harley Quinn, Manchester, and Arcus at gear 11, and I have Etrigan at level 70 but only gear 10 for the purposes of showing you the effects of gearing up that fourth character. So I'm going to go into a battle here in red alerts with mostly energy enemies and one Zatanna. So I'm going to try a battle with only one gear 11 character and mostly gear 10 characters. Remember, Etrigan is level 70, so that does help a little bit. But this is an affinity advantaged battle where the only neutral case is the Zatanna on the opposing team. So what you'll see here in this battle is that it should be relatively easy. Wonder Woman does a lot of the heavy lifting, and so does Etrigan as soon as he starts getting buffed up. But mainly the fact that the gear levels of the opponents are actually a little bit lower, even though their levels show higher than 70. They're mostly not at gear 11. Because most of your roster is not at gear 11 either, considering that at most you only have 3 characters if you're developing it like mine in this video. So as you can see, there's not much resistance put up here, and we're easily able to clean it up. So such is the case with 3 gear 11s and mostly a gear 10 roster. Alright, next up, I'd like to show the effects of your power rating on the PvP Wraith Arena boards. As you can see here, I have a decent amount of high-level battles from 8 to 14 points, about 2 or 3 of them on my board, and mainly the rest between 6 to 9. I only actually have 1 3 to 6 battle on this entire board. So having only a couple of gear 11 characters and the rest being at gear 10 allows me to have a reasonable amount of high scores overall. Alrighty, here I'd like to show the transition going from the 3rd to 4th gear 11 character. So as you can see here, I'm in the process of gearing up my Etrigan from gear 10 to gear 11. And then I'm going to jump into red alerts to show the difference in difficulty of the battles that we had previously. So let's jump into red alerts. Alright, so we jump into red alerts, and now I'm looking around for some teams, and I'm going to ideally look for something that's allowing me to have an affinity advantage over it, like our previous battle when we had only 3 gear 11s on our roster. So I'm looking around, and I'm eventually settling on an all Mystic opponent's team, and ideally what I'd like to do is do something like I had before, where I had maybe 1 or 2 gear 11 characters and the other gear 10s to see how they hold up. Especially the fact that I would be having the the affinity advantage, even though I'm a little bit under geared. As you can see here, I settled on an all blue team. They're all above level 70, but if it's anything like the previous battle in red alerts, it shouldn't be too much of an issue, right? So I decided to go for all reds, with 1 gear 11 being Harley Quinn, Manchester. So let's see how that fares now that I have 4 Gear 11s on my roster rather than just 3. So we start out the battle here, and ideally the game plan is to put a lot of debuffs on their team and take them down quickly, especially with the affinity advantage damage. Looks like we're not doing too much damage already, but let's see if that does changes quickly with Harley Quinn Mad Jester. They have lots of debuffs on their team, so things are working out well, but damage isn't quite adding up as we expected. So it looks like their defensive capabilities are a lot higher than expected. So what this means to me is that the opponent's overall gear set has in fact increased. Previously, while they were above level 70, it was obvious that their defense was low, meaning that they probably weren't geared up to gear 11, and in fact were at gear 10 or maybe gear 10.5 at most. So as you can see here, things are not working out very well for me. So I'm spending some time trying to figure out if I can actually scrape out a win here. I'm trying my best to take down the characters one by one. Oh, but there goes my only gear 11 character. Now I'm faced with 3 gear 10s versus probably 4 gear 11s level and above level 70s. Even though I have the affinity advantage here, you can see how much harder it is with that gap in that rise in difficulty as a result of changing your gears. Found a couple of them, but the rest of their team were able to take down all of my team despite the affinity disadvantage. So that doesn't bode very well now, does it? So the last thing I'd like to showcase is the effect of getting your 4th gear 11 character, as it affects your power rating, and this will change obviously your PvP boards. So as you can see here, I have a new PvP board in front of me, and as you can see, I don't have any more 8 to 14 or high level battles as a result. This is not always the case, but you'll see that you will get less high level battles, and in this case my board is mainly comprised of 6 to 9 and 3 to 6 battles. So even though I have an average of maybe 26 to up to 30k teams, I'm still not getting that many high level battles. So just to sum it all up again, personally I believe there's 3 ways to build out your roster. That is to have fun and build around something you like, to focus on a core group of characters that will help you get through most of the game, or to diversify your roster so that you have more options to almost any situation. And while I personally do lean towards a diversified strategy myself, there is no best strategy, and you should pick one that would best suit your needs. So that brings us to the end of this episode of RM. I'm not sure when I'll be doing the next episode, but when I do, it'll most likely be regarding gear farming. If there are any topics that you would like covered in future episodes, feel free to comment below or post on Reddit, and I'll be sure to consider it. And if you enjoy the podcast we put out every other week, be sure to check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/theoddsman. And remember, we have a monthly giveaway of iTunes or Google Play gift cards to our patrons at the $1 tier or higher. So this has been DP0427 for Resource Management. Hope this helps.